All right. So phones away. Give me a few minutes. And then you'll have the rest of the hour to cover some content. So we haven't done this in a little while. So here we go. We're looking at the end of the Cold War, the impact of that. What does it then lead to? Okay. So we already talked about the end of the Cold War, how the Soviet Union fell apart, that in an effort to save the Soviet Union, the leader of the Soviet Union basically doomed it. And the breaking up of the Soviets into various republics, where when I was your age, this was one country, Soviet Union. Today it's 17 and counting. That is continuing. That the fragmenting of the Soviet Union, it split apart here. And the attempt by not only the former republics of the Soviet Union, but Eastern Europe as well, to go to capitalism, to adopt capitalism as the economic model, sort of a giving up of communism as an economic model. And that's why it's just largely acknowledged that the U.S. sort of won the Cold War. But we also claim that doesn't mean that these people lost, that they won too, that they became wise to the benefits of capitalism. But herein lies some of the challenges that existed. We're going to look at the thing that doesn't even exist anymore, this thing called Yugoslavia. It's not even a country anymore. What happened to it? What happened to Yugoslavia? What happens to NATO, right? NATO's purpose during the Cold War was keep communism right there. Well, mission accomplished. Is that the end of NATO? If not, well, then what's NATO's stated purpose? If it's no longer an anti-Soviet, anti-communist military organization, then what is it? And what is it today? And then the third thing we're going to kind of look at is this big word here, nuclear proliferation. What does that even mean? Okay, here we go. We're just going to kind of look at these things. So you got to orient yourself to what we're looking at here. This is Italy, right there, Italy. Okay. Traveling east from Italy, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different colors, but pretend it's one color. Pretend it's one color. That is a thing called Yugoslavia, or was a thing called Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was a country made up of definite ethnic groups. The people that are in this thing called Croatia would identify themselves as Croatian. No, Croatian. Good guess. These people that live in Serbia would be Serbian, Bosnian, Herzegovinian, Slovenian. But during the Cold War, it was this thing called Yugoslavia. Does anyone happen to know when was Yugoslavia created?
1918.
Okay, after what event is what I meant? You're right, 1918, World War I. Very good. So what they did was, after World War I, the victorious countries sort of took apart what used to be the Austro-Hungarian Empire and recreated this thing called Yugoslavia. But rather than create a country called Croatia and another country called Serbia and another country called Bosnia and another country called Herzegovina, rather than do that, they kind of put it together into one thing called Yugoslavia. Now, during the Cold War, big deal. During the Cold War, American and Soviet military influence prevented civil war, right? There's too much focus on the Americans and the Soviets to attack each other. End of the Cold War. No more American, no more Soviet. Civil war begins. So may I ask this, can you understand? Why did the civil war in Yugoslavia occur when it did? Why then? Why not 10 years previously? There was just as much hatred.
Also, their leader died.
Yeah, that's sort of a the trigger event. The answer is what I just said. So come on.
There's no Americans or Russians.
Okay, there's no American or Soviet military presence to kind of prevent it from happening. There's a vacuum. There's that opportunity that exists. So it says here, when Soviets left, these ethnic hatreds resurfaced. These people remembered, oh yeah, I hate you Serbians. The Serbians said, oh yeah, you're a bunch of Muslims, because that's Muslim. Most Serbians are what's called Eastern Orthodox. It's a form of Christianity, right? So it erupts when it does because of the end of the Cold War, and this green country here and this yellow country here say, we don't want to be part of Yugoslavia anymore. We want to declare our independence. Now, the United States has sort of a mixed record when it comes to parts of it declaring independence. You know what I mean? Nah.
Yeah. No,
Right. The American Civil War, when Southern states declared independence, Northern states said, no, you don't. You're not independent, and fought the American Civil War based on the idea that once you join the United States, you cannot quit. You're stuck. And yet here, when the United States basically voiced support for Croatia and Bosnia to declare independence, Serbia, the power that said, no, you're not seceding, basically told the U.S., butt out. And by the way, how come you can deny when states secede from you, but we can't? All we're doing is what you did 150 years ago. So let us keep our country together just like you kept your country together. And our response was no.
I think it's different, though.
Different. Yeah, different.
It is, though.
I know that.
It's like actually,
I wasn't disagreeing with you.
You're saying it all sarcastically.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
Will, you're so smart.
See, exactly.
Okay, so what we had here was a civil war. Serbian soldiers invading Croatia, invading Bosnia and Herzegovina, and fighting each other. But it gets more complicated than that. Here's where you're going to have to put on your thinking cap. The person that lives right there, identify that person, please. He is a Serbian. Okay, now, raise your hand right now if you are Irish. How can you be Irish? You live in America. That makes you an American. How can you be Irish? Explain, please. You're not wrong. I hope you're not thinking, maybe I'm not Irish. You are Irish. What makes you Irish? Okay, family descent. Understand that, please. Understand now this. There were Serbians who lived in Bosnia. Just like there's an Irish guy living in America, there were Serbians in Bosnia. Now, we would call that fella over there an Irish American. Okay? Now, I'm going to try and get one of you to predict what we would call this Serbian who lives in Bosnia. A reminder, that's an Irish American. If you're German, you're a German American. So, apply the rule. But then, wait, there's one thing you have to do. Switch it.
A Bosnian Serb.
What?
A Bosnian Serb.
A Bosnian Serb is correct. A Bosnian Serb is a person of Serbian descent who lives in the green part. He's a Bosnian with Serbian ancestry. You follow me? You need to know that. It's a test question. Bosnian Serb. A Bosnian with Serbian ancestry. Understand? They formed their own army. The Bosnian Serb Army. Their ally was the Serbian army. They had a common goal: defeat Bosnia. Make Serbia more powerful. Understand? There's the Bosnian Serb army fighting the Bosnian army with Serbian help. Plus, there's the Croatian army fighting the Serbian army. Good God. What makes the American Civil War so simple is that there were two sides. This is abnormal in world history. Most civil wars are not them versus them. It's more like them versus them versus them versus them, and then they assassinate everybody. It's a revolution. The word revolution means round. Man, you want to get confused? Study the French Revolution. They killed the king, and then they overthrew them, and then they overthrew them, and then they overthrew them, and they Napoleon.
King.
Emperor. Right. Okay. So this is a mess. It's a mess.
The
They've got an army. They've got an army. They've got an army, and then they've got an army.
The king is dead.
I mean, there were examples where the Bosnian Serb army was fighting the Croatians, and they were like, "Why are we fighting you?" I don't know, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Genocide occurred. The Serbian military wiped out Muslim towns. That's killing based on religion. That's what genocide is. If a whole lot of people die in an earthquake, it's not genocide. It's awful, but it's not genocide.
What if it happened to be in like a very ethnically homogenous place?
Right.
Was it like a targeted earthquake?
If a shooter, an active shooter came into this building, I mean, God forbid, but let's just say it happened, an active shooter, and killed 30 people. It's awful, but it's not a genocide. Genocide is based on specific criteria. Is it based on a common religion? Then it's genocide. Is it based on a common ethnic identity? Then it's genocide. But if it's juniors, that's not genocide, right? It's terrible, but it's not genocide. Okay. The reason I'm saying that is because there were accusations that the Serbian army engaged in genocide. United Nations investigated and concluded, yep, there's genocide. Now we can accuse the Serbians of war crimes. Right? Now we can accuse you of violating international law. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what brought NATO in. NATO is on the outside looking in saying, well, I mean, it's a civil war. Civil wars happen. Who are we to interject ourselves and say one side's wrong and one side's right? Genocide. Now NATO can get involved. And that's exactly what happened. This is in the wrong order. Sorry. NATO should be before Dayton Peace Accords. Understand that what brought NATO in was genocide. That's what brought the United States now can be involved. We can now accuse the Serbians of violating international law, whereas before, it's a civil war. What do we have to do with it? Now we can say you broke the rules, and now NATO can get involved, and NATO did get involved. Bombing Serbia. Americans bombing Serbia. NATO, the military entity during the Cold War, bombed Serbia to get Serbia to stop preventing the secession of Croatia and Bosnia Herzegovina. Okay? Which brings us to the final thing on here, and then I'm done. And that is the peace agreement that ended this civil war, which is called the Dayton Peace Accords, as in Dayton, Ohio. And you might be thinking, why Dayton, Ohio? Don't they make tires there? Yes, they do. They make tires in Dayton, Ohio. It is also the place where this treaty was signed. Dayton, Ohio. And you might be thinking, how? Why there? Okay. So the United States, now this isn't quite right, but it's darn close, basically kidnapped the leaders of Croatia, Bosnia, and Serbia, flew them to Dayton, Ohio, and said, you're not leaving until you three make an agreement. And they said things like, you can't do this. And we said, you're right. So we'll see you in a few days. And left them there in Dayton, Ohio, where there's nothing to do. Right? They probably signed the treaty out of boredom. And they did. They signed this treaty. It's called the Dayton Peace Accords, 1995. This is an interesting solution. Let's go back to, do you remember when President Bush was right here and one of the groups suggested partitioning Iraq? Right? Splitting it up?
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Dayton Peace Accords did. Split up Yugoslavia into what you're seeing here. But there's one group who's not represented on the map. Do you remember?
Montenegro?
What? Good God.
Bosnia.
Who is he?
Irish American.
Uh-huh.
Bosnian Serb?
The Bosnian Serbs. Where are they?
I don't know. Get out.
Okay,
Serbia.
so mentally do this. Draw everywhere there's a black line between, put American soldiers. American soldiers, and I'm talking about right now. Thank you for visually doing that. Right now, there are American soldiers standing between Croatia and Serbia, standing between Bosnia and Serbia. You can't fight each other if there's an American in the way. You're not going to kill the Americans, so okay. But there's one more line you have to draw mentally, and you have to carve into Bosnia and Herzegovina. Just carve a little chunk of it. I don't really care if it's accurate. Who cares? Just carve a little chunk out of it. That is the Bosnian Serb semi-autonomous, which means kind of independent region. They're not represented at the UN. They don't have their own Olympic team. They don't get their own military. They don't get their own international airports, but they rule themselves. They don't get to have any relationship with any foreign country, but they are sort of independent. Think of Native American tribal lands, right? They're sort of independent. Now, they don't get to sign treaties with foreign countries. They don't get their own Olympic team. They don't get their own international airports, but they do have their own court systems. They do have their own laws. You can net fish, you can spearfish, you can gamble, you can smoke. You can do all those things inside the border of Wisconsin, but not in Wisconsin. Inside of Wisconsin, but not in Wisconsin, right? If you find yourself on a Native American tribal area, you can gamble, smoke, spearfish, net fish, etc. All those other rules, okay?
So can I open like an illegal gambling ring in the Native American?
What do you think the answer to that is, white boy?
Yeah.
Hey,
I thought race didn't matter.
so anyway, it would appear, my last thing I'm going to say, and then you do have about 20 minutes-ish to do. The last thing I'm going to say is this. It appears that NATO has found its new role. Enforcer of international law. The cops, right? If country A has engaged in violation of international law in country B can go to NATO and say, NATO, help us.
Yeah, how about
It appears that NATO has found its new cause, and that will last 6 years. 1995 plus 6 equals another number.
2002?
Wow. Okay. And then NATO will find itself in a new role. Okay. Any questions?
NATO.
There, I'm done. You're here. Now you have the rest of the hour to finish article summary number 1. Assume that article summary number 2 will be next week. Start attacking that bad boy. 10 of you, Vietnam paper. 10 of you, Persian Gulf War test. What the crap?
Are we turning in these article summaries?
On Google.
There's a spot for them.
It should say article summary.